The Martians. Chapter 20. The day had arrived, and Mission Control was stuffed with the full staffs of 2 ships and missions. Even with all the staff, everyone was busy checking and rechecking everything from telemetry to the weather on Mars. Communication systems were constantly checked, and information flowed between Houston and both ships. It made for a busy evening in Houston, a busy afternoon on Mars, and a busy middle of the night on Hermes. The press gallery had limited space, but Montrose had made sure there was room for KK, who she had flown in so as to report on the launch and recovery for the audience of the NASA press videos. Her reactions were filmed for the report and she was given access to a telemetry screen that had only the most basic data. Mitch Henderson took time the day before to show her what the data meant, including the biomonitors for each astronaut, which gave no detail other than an icon like the ones on the cruise huts that merely showed that a signal was being received, the basic timers for the 2 ships, and altitude and distance information. Ratings were good, and the public's interest renewed as launch approached. KK's father waited with her, while her mother was in the family room that was full of all the families from both crews, as well as Irene and her assistants in case something went terribly wrong. Mark and Donna had little to do, and Missy not much more. Mindy and Anna did the talking with Hermes and Houston, with Missy occasionally helping with the Houston traffic. The plan called for Victoria I to launch just as Hermes was going around the dark side of Mars, then once in orbit Hermes would catch up to the ship. Hermes would then splay off into a long elliptical orbit, taking several days to return to near Mars before accelerating around and returning to Earth. Orion 3 would have to launch within a window of about 15 minutes in order to make this possible, which was longer than many launch windows on Earth had been for missions in the past. Still, it left little room for error. Like the MAV, Orion 3 had spent its time on Mars making maneuvering fuel, but its main engines would run on material brought on its trip from Earth. It had enough to return to Earth by itself, but that was not considered realistic unless a total failure to link up occurred. Finally, Rick sent the message all had waited for. Victoria I, Hermes actual. On my mark, optimal launch window of 14:52 to begin in 30 seconds. Mark. Copy. Copy Hermes. Victoria I, Orion 3 Park, launch window in 23:22. Mindy began to count down as everyone aboard shifted their helmets to press against the towels all had stuffed behind their necks. At the end of the count, Mindy radioed back. Hermes, Houston, Victoria I Park, countdown to launch in 30 seconds. A half-minute later she began a 10-second countdown. Anna threw the 3 switches to begin the ignition sequence and nothing happened. After a few seconds of hearing the ignition motors hiss, Mindy ordered Anna to shut them down. Houston, be advised. Launch failed. Repeat, launch failed. Ignition engines failed to ignite. Tracing the problem now. Advise Hermes. Copy. What happened? Missy demanded. The ignition motors didn't light, so there was nothing to light the mains. We don't have enough fuel to run the ignition motors forever, so we shut them down. The bus, it shows there is power, but, oh shit. What? They are lit by small spark gaps, that's where the failure is. Mindy said as she tracked the problem on screen to the end of the wiring harness. Can you fix it? No. Work around? No, either there, it is like someone took the spark plugs to our engines away. Probably sitting in the atmosphere here and the temperature differentials corroded and, shit. So, you need a spark and can't make one? Missy asked. Not in the time we have. Oh God. Calm down. Work the problem. Ideas, people. Missy said. How long do we have? Mark asked. 13.5 minutes. And how much fuel do you have for the ignition motors? Oh, a minute at least, probably 2 but without. So you can idle for a minute before you engage the mains. Yes, but. And you just need a spark or fire? Mark asked. Yes, but, no, Mark, that's Mindy started to say. Is the only choice we have. It would take too long to get the rover cable and cut it, and I don't have anything here to cut it with easily. Besides, I can make it back in 2 or 3 minutes. I can make it back in half a minute each way. I might not get back to my seat, but I can get back and cycle through the airlock before you engage. It will work. I can lash to a cot downstairs until we break gravity, then come back up, or if I have time, just come back up. Give me a launch count and I will know which to do. I want out of here. Mark said as he unstrapped himself. What are you two talking about? Missy demanded. Thermite. We made some for our going away celebration, good thing too, or we would be stuck on Mars. Watney grinned as he practically jumped down to the main level. Watney. Missy shouted. It's all we have. Hermes can't hang around, and we don't have another way to make a spark in, 13 minutes. Mindy said, her face revealing her stress and worry. Anna, after the ignition motors light, can you idle them down to give Mark more time? Yeah, I can get him probably 3.5 to 4 minutes by reducing the fuel pressure. You're not seriously going to? Houston, Orion 3, Park. Be advised, we are going to try manual ignition of a starter motor using remote device. Hold for more information, Mindy said. Hurry, Mark. Mindy said. By this time Mark had already cycled through the airlock and was skipping, the fastest way to sprint in low gravity, to the botany hab. It was a time Missy was glad she wasn't making orders. The ship and its flight belonged to Mindy, but she knew it was the right decision, the best one to give them the best chance of not being stranded indefinitely or wasting all their research by going to the MAV. Missy didn't have to imagine what Mindy was going through. Mark was actually happy to finally get to set off another thermite device. They didn't explode, they just used magnesium and a bit of LOX to ignite a reaction whereby the oxygen from the ferrous oxide on the rocks transferred to the aluminum. This released an incredible amount of heat and sparks, but the pressure wasn't significant enough to cause more than an initial pop. Even if the thermite didn't react, the magnesium would ignite, and that alone should be enough to cause fire to the starter motor's fuel. Watney already knew which of the ones he had made with Mindy he was going to use, as it had the most magnesium and was certain to light if only for that reason. Mark cycled through the hab airlock. This took a half-minute, so on the way out he simply left the outer door open. Unlike on the ship, it didn't close automatically. When it came to get off Mars or risking his plants, the plants could die. They would be protected by the inner door, unless it failed sometime in the future. Mark crammed the cut end of the long cable into the container, then did the low-gravity skip back to Orion 3. The cowling came down to just about a foot above the ground, and Mark placed the device under, weighing it down with a rock to keep it from coming out as he returned to the hab to plug it in. Had Mark not been wearing his EVA he would have known there was a problem, but of course, in an EVA you can't smell the air outside, or feel the slight breeze from underneath the cowling. Mindy, Anna, I'm about to connect the power, you ready? Connect on my mark, Watney. 1 2 3 Mark. Anna shouted as she turned on the ignition motors. Mark connected the power and was about to sprint to the ship, but fate intervened. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a cloud of vaporized JP-1 from the previous launch attempt, as well as the O2 and hydrogen from the ignition motors that had collected under the cowling, trapped there by being warmer than the surrounding atmosphere, ignited. Watney stared as a side panel from the cowling blew away. A shock wave was coming towards him as he gasped, wondering what had gone wrong. The shock went through the ship but caused no damage. The explosion wasn't compressed enough to harm the ship as its energy blew out the sides of the cowling. It did tell the gyroscopic leveling systems that the ship was tilting, although it wasn't, and in an instant the system believed the ship was about to fall. The safety system kicked in without Anna or Mindy doing anything, and the main engines fired, slinging the Orion 3 into liftoff. The detachable stairway blew off and flew toward Watney. When Orion 3 was but a few hundred meters above Mars, Watney's biomonitor icon disappeared from everyone's HUDs, and the same signal was sent to Houston. "Noo-oo-oo-oo." KK screamed when the telemetry came in. Henderson saw it at the same time, heard KK scream, and felt like someone had kicked him in the gut. "Annie, take her to the family room." Then he turned to his assistant and ordered, "Shut the doors." The standard signal that was given when a catastrophe had occurred. Henderson knew, KK knew, and everyone else figured it out quickly. Mark Watney was dead. Incinerated by the liftoff of Orion 3.